speaking of things that are happening under the nose of Marxists in the West, is that the biggest division between East and West in Marxism cannot really be put on explicit theoretical terms, because Marxism-Leninism in the East is never considered to be reducible to a theoretical explication whatsoever. There's a certain Maoist brilliance that is simply given in China. But you have to ask this question: how is this brilliance given in China, in the Communist Party and even the people, in a sense, when you cannot find anywhere a code of laws where this is all simply made explicit in all its wealth and all its depth and all its complexity and its applicability to the world and so on? And the answer is that there is an index of accumulated experience of Marxism-Leninism that is subterranean. It is below the surface. It's below the sea. It's unconscious. It's in all the deepest Freudian, metaphysical, whatever connotations of the word. In both Russia and China and elsewhere, there's an accumulated index of Marxist-Leninist experience that, while is not enunciated explicitly, is still recalled as a matter of deeper sense. You don't need to read books by Badiou in China to understand the meaning of primary and secondary contradiction. It only suffices to point to an example, and then it's just an I see what you mean moment. You know what I mean? And there's an accumulation of that kind of intuitive sense in Eastern Marxism-Leninism, where you just simply have an aha moment, and then not only are you able to see the meaning of it in this specific instance, it's not like some English common law or something, you're able to actively apply it to other things as well. It opens up, it unlocks aspects of reality that that weren't before. It makes things intelligible that were not before intelligible about reality. And I think the way that you could put this in the Western thinking, I think, would be almost like Deleuze's idea of transcendental empiricism. Now, it's a really brief rundown. For Kant, the transcendental, we know his thing, the transcendental aesthetic is one thing, or two things, right? It's space and time, or something like that, right? Deleuze goes so far as to refuse to define any one object of the transcendental aesthetic. For Deleuze, the transcendental aesthetic, which is experience beyond the threshold of, the surface, consciousness, it's an experience, it's a wealth, it's a reality that has depth and wealth that must be actively and continually discovered. It's called transcendental empiricism in a similar way as the regular kind of empiricism to nature. It means there's a lot of shit in nature, right? And empiricism means we're discovering different ways of relating to them by the senses. For Deleuze, it's the same thing with the transcendental reality, is what I'm trying to say. There's a lot of shit out there, right? All of this stuff, again, which is coming from Heidegger ultimately, this ways of thinking. This is the only way you can translate Marxism-Leninism into Western terms, meaningful Western terms. If you try to import Eastern Marxism at face value in the West, you're going to end up with clownery and absurdity. Really through theory, specifically, I think this is a position we all share, is it's been through Heidegger that something like Marxism-Leninism can be smuggled into the Western way of thinking and made legible and intelligible to the Western mind, is through Heidegger. Because why? Because through Heidegger you then have Kojève. When you read someone like Kojève, right, you get the sense that you're only on the tip of the iceberg, and then real Marxism-Leninism, like what's going on in the Soviet Union, acquires this transcendent reality, which means you don't think it's something that's reducible to the superficial forms. It's a very deep reality that can only be perceived in some way or sensed somehow through this kind of very intense, heavy kind of theory that goes, again, deep. You need something very complicated to arrive at what is simple in reality. But you will never appreciate what is simple in reality, which is the experience of Marxism-Leninism, through a simple analysis, if that makes sense. Well, but it's not just Kojève, and then you have Bataille. Specifically, Marxism-Leninism, at the time of Bataille's heyday, the 50s, in the Soviet Union, are striking. It's never an explicit rendering of the theory, but it's more a manifestation, almost symptomally, if you want, of accidentally of what the consequences of this are for thinking. But this is only where the West is able to encounter and appreciate the depth and wealth of what we call Marxism-Leninism. It's through these very strange, eclectic, and bizarre thinkers who have ultimately drawn from Heidegger. If you are a sophisticated Maoist in the West, you're probably a follower of Badiou. Badiou is someone who tells you that you can be a Maoist without being cringe. You can be a Maoist without LARPing, right? You can have an appreciation that there's a deeper reality besides this kind of clowning shit. And Badiou comes, his lineage, again, traces to Heidegger.
What I found interesting about Badiou, and also what we're talking about in relation to deeper sense and objectivity, is that with Badiou, you kind of see the way that a culture relates to this deeper sense. Because, if you follow a political commitment through to its final end, or an aesthetic commitment through to its final end, or even a scientific commitment, fully through, what you're going to end up doing is inheriting the full legacy and history of their culture. And so there's kind of this unity almost between just the common intuition of the people and then the highest achievements of culture.